I'm Marty Stouffer. Some of our most distinctive birds are found in the family of quail. In their delightful calls, their elegant coloration, and their value to man, everything about them is attractive. The bobwhite is the most numerous and most widely distributed, and since it's the only quail found in the eastern half of our country, many think of it as the only one we have. But 5 other unique species live in scattered areas of the west and southwest. The members of this family reach the highest level of avian beauty, for few other birds are pretty as a quail. A familiar whistle echoes across the quiet countryside. The characteristic calling of one of America's best-loved birds. For most of the year, bobwhite travel in social units called coveys, usually 10 to 20 birds, and no more than 30. The male bobwhite calls for a mate, then listens hopefully for the sweet reply of the buff-colored hen. Of all our native quail, none have more vocalizations than the bobwhite. No less than 24 separate calls communicate a variety of messages. Continuous communication holds the group together as the birds forage or take an occasional dust bath. As the early colonists moved westward, opening the dense woodlands for small family farms, the bobwhite followed. In a diverse habitat of weedy hedgerows, cultivated fields, and shady forest glens, their numbers grew to record proportions. The bobwhite is well known as the farmer's best friend, feeding on crop-damaging insects and weed seeds. Only in spring, the breeding season, does the normally harmonious bobwhite covey grow restless. Because males outnumber females, competition for hens can be intense. Although duels to the death are not unheard of, most clashes are brief and bloodless. Like all members of the quail family, the bobwhite is primarily monogamous. Once mated, the male and female bobwhite are inseparable. Several weeks after breeding, the male and female will go off to nest, sometimes in close proximity to other pairs. The covey is essential to the survival of the ground-roosting bobwhite. In the evening, the group crowds together in a tight circle. Like the spokes of a wheel, their heads radiate outward. Each bird in the roosting ring lifts its wings slightly to form an unbroken circle. This allows for the transfer of body heat. With all eyes facing outward, the bobwhite covey has a 360-degree view of approaching danger. The explosive burst of the covey surprises the bobcat. Wings whirring in all directions leave the predator indecisive. Meanwhile, the quail have flown less than 200 yards away. A comeback call is used to reassemble the covey. They huddle again in their defensive formation. The simultaneous flushing behavior is what also makes the bobwhite a challenging quarry for human hunters. North America is home to 6 species of quail, the only members of the pheasant family native to the Western Hemisphere. The bobwhite, standing about 10 inches tall, is best known. It's found mainly in the eastern half of the United States, from Canada to the Gulf Coast. Now an endangered species, the closely related masked bobwhite was once widespread in a narrow strip of southern Arizona along the Mexican border. The scaled quail is still found in relative abundance in arid landscapes. It lives from southern Colorado and southwest Kansas west to central Arizona and south into Mexico. The Gambel's quail is another beautiful resident of our southwest deserts. This plumed quail is closely related to the California quail. California, or valley quail, live in a variety of habitats, from the semi-arid desert brushland of Southern California to the damp, craggy coastline of Oregon. At nearly 12 inches, the striking mountain quail is the largest. It lives in western coastal ranges as well as the Sierra Nevada, from 1,500 feet to timberline in summer. The shy Montezuma quail is found in grassy canyons and on mountain slopes of our southwest. The chunky Montezuma, or harlequin quail as it's sometimes called, is the smallest of the quail family, at only 8 inches tall. Many consider it the most colorful and comical, with its clown face and bushy helmet-like crest. The female is duller and lacks the strong facial pattern of the male. This quail has large, heavily clawed feet for unearthing bulbs and roots. In summer, insects, like beetles and caterpillars, are the mainstay of its diet. The range of the Montezuma once overlapped that of the masked bobwhite. Overgrazing and several years of severe drought left the masked bobwhite without a home. By the turn of the century, it had disappeared from Arizona, though remnant populations remained in Mexico. In 1967, the masked bobwhite was officially listed as endangered. Since that time, wildlife professionals have worked to secure a safe haven for the birds and have tried some unusual and creative techniques for reintroduction. Sterilized common bobwhite are being released along with the masked bobwhite, in hopes that, if a masked parent dies, the common bobwhite will take over as surrogate parent to incubate the eggs and rear the chicks. The plan appears to be working. A few birds have survived and raised their own chicks on this unique Arizona refuge. In the tall grass of a country meadow, a bobwhite cock has constructed a shallow nest and lined it with grass. Over the course of several weeks, his mate has laid a dozen small white eggs, one egg at a time. The hen gently turns the eggs and is careful to keep them close together. A few days before hatching, an unborn chick makes a tiny pinhole opening in its egg and begins breathing with its lungs. It also starts making a nearly inaudible clicking noise, as many as 80 to 150 clicks per minute. It's theorized that chicks within eggs that are close together can hear each other's clicks, and this stimulates them to break into the world at almost the same moment, a phenomenon called synchronized hatching. More than 3 weeks have passed since the parents began patiently incubating the eggs. Then, within hours, the chicks all hatch. Even before their down has dried, the rambunctious bobwhite babies are investigating their world. Quail mature as fast as any bird in the world. They begin foraging almost immediately. Sometimes a chick's eyes are too big for its stomach. They have no time to lose because the life of a bobwhite is fleeting, just 8 months on average. Only 20% live to see their second summer. Far to the west, a new day is breaking in New Mexico. The cheerful call of the Gambel's quail floats across an arid landscape. Newly hatched chicks and their parents trek to a familiar water hole in the early morning hours. Large groups regularly gather to drink before feeding. Gambel's quail live year-round in tangled brush along creeks and ravines, thick and thorny places where they feed on weed seeds, berries, and the fruit of the cholla, prickly pear, and barrel cacti. Unruly tufts of head feathers on the little chicks will grow into the elegant plumes which characterize both sexes of adult Gambels. Like most quail which live in dry areas, Gambels can often be seen dust bathing, a form of dry cleaning their feathers to rid them of excess oil and parasites. The colorful male Gambels has the appropriate nickname of redhead, for a rusty red crown, punctuated with a dramatic question mark-shaped plume. The cock's black face and crown are outlined in white. The black patch on his unscaled belly is another good way to distinguish him from the California quail. The male California quail has a gray forehead and a smaller rusty crown, but the plumes of both male and female are nearly identical to the Gambel's. A covey begins to forage an hour or two after sunrise and several hours before sunset. The California quail is mostly vegetarian. It eats seeds, buds, leaves, acorns, and wild berries, but few insects. In the late 1800s, market hunters, lying in wait by watering holes, bagged thousands of birds. They were paid $1 per dozen birds, and as many as 100,000 were killed in one year, to supply the tables of San Francisco and Los Angeles. By the turn of the century, hunting tapered off as quail numbers plummeted. But the beautiful birds have made a comeback. The loud, clear call of the California quail is fairly common again in much of the state. Among ponderosa pine in the high country of the Sierras, a covey of mountain quail has begun to forage. The largest of our native species, at nearly half a pound, the mountain quail may also be our most beautiful. The alert male carries his long, straight plumes erect. His rich mahogany throat is bordered with white, and his flanks are dramatically striped. Mountain quail roam over large areas to feed on seeds and bulbs, flowers, fruits, and insects. The cautious birds are difficult to hunt because they rarely fly, choosing instead to make a run for it. In the fall, they migrate down from the mountains, sometimes marching in orderly single file for up to 40 miles, to winter in sheltered, snow-free valleys. Their vertical migration ranks as one of the shortest of all migratory birds, but among North American quail, they're the only species which migrates at all. On a sunny alpine ridge in early summer, thoughts of winter migration are far away. A hen is preparing to incubate her clutch of eggs. Her nest is a slight depression scraped in the ground and lined with a few dry leaves, pine needles, and grass. In about 3 weeks, if all goes well, mountain quail chicks will emerge into their high country home. To the east of the Rocky Mountains, the scaled quail is scratching out an existence on the plains of southeastern Colorado. Near the protection of a cholla cactus, a covey forages for insects. The semi-arid range of the scaled quail can be as dry and inhospitable as any quail habitat in the country. But it seems to suit the swift and wily blue racers, as they're sometimes called. Blue because of the bluish-gray cast of their back and wings, and racers because these fleet-footed quail are more likely to run from danger than any of their quail cousins. Scaled quail are also called cotton tops for their fluffy white crests. Belly and breast feathers are rimmed with black and give their plumage a shingled or scaled effect. Predators abound in the scrubby arroyos and ravines of scaled quail country. Even the cat-like agility of the swift fox is no match for the cottontops, elusive members of our elegant family of American quail. Birds of great beauty are often greatly hunted, and quail are no exception. Fortunately, these cheerful creatures are prolific and have been aided by the clearing of land for agriculture. In return, quail benefit farmers by eating weed seeds and insects, so they're as helpful as they are handsome. All birds fascinate me, but I can think of few that are pretty as a quail. I'm Marty Stouffer. Until next time, enjoy our wild America.